Hello.
Hola, bienvenidos.
For improved environmental decision-making. My name is Lou Verscho. I'm the principal scientist at the Alliance Bioversity SEAT, and I'm the lead scientist for the International Center for Tropical Agriculture on the Severe Amazonia program, and I'll be your moderator today. Earth observation and geospatial decision support systems play an increasingly critical role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, in reducing the impacts of climate change, monitoring deforestation, and that causes improving management of protected areas and other conservation units. These systems can provide support for solutions to development problems, but they don't provide the solutions themselves. We use these support systems to bring together remote communities, marginalized groups with data and information, and try to level the playing field by providing information and democratizing information. Recent advances in remote sensing technologies increase coverage, timeliness, precision of data information, allow decision makers to act faster, preventing disasters, and also overcoming illegal activities in the Amazon basin. But translating this data and information into useful information is a challenge. We need to empower a wide range of stakeholders to understand and use and be able to use this data. We know that policy processes are inherently linked to power struggles, where policymaking is driven by political disputes and in interest and competition, rather than being a rational solution-oriented process. As scientists and as technical people, we need to be aware of this and ensure that the technologies that we are developing and deploying are facilitating greater dialogue and greater participation so that we can find sustainable solutions. So I'd like to begin this session by introducing three people who will give us keynote speeches and welcoming speeches. The first speaker will be Juan Lucas Restrepo, who is the Director General of the Alliance Bioversity International and the International Center for Tropical Agriculture, SEAT. He's a Colombian and French national and has worked in agricultural domain, both in public and private sectors for the past 25 years. He has significant experience in policy, value chains, markets, and in leading agricultural research. Juan Lucas has served as Vice Minister for the Colombian Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development and is Executive Director of AgroSabia, the largest agricultural research organization in Colombia. He holds a degree in civil engineering from the University de los Andes in Colombia and a master's in science in agricultural economics from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. The second welcoming speech will be from Gavin Schmidt, a climatologist, climate modeler, and a director of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies in New York. As a director of the Goddard Institute and principal investigator in the Earth System Model, Gavin is interested in understanding past, present, and future climates, the impacts of multiple drivers of climate change, including solar irradiance, atmospheric chemistry, aerosols, and greenhouse gases. Gavin currently serves as Senior Climate Advisor to ensure the achievement of NASA's climate science objectives under the Biden administration. Gavin has a PhD in applied mathematics at from the University College in London. The third speaker will be Jean Thomas, Mission Director for USAID Peru. Jean Thomas currently serving as Mission Director of USAID Peru and has worked for the agency for the past 22 years. His most recent assignment included USAID Haiti Mission Director from 2016 to 2019. Director of Office of Caribbean Affairs in Washington, D.C., 2014 to 2015. Throughout his career, Mr. Thomas has specialized in issues relating to democracy, governance, and human rights. He earned a BA in geology at the University of Texas, Austin. He also studied public policy at the University of Maryland and environmental management and sustainable development at the Ibero-American University in Mexico City. These are pre-recorded videos, and so I will see you all in 9 minutes after these videos. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, friends and colleagues. Greetings from Rome. I'm very pleased to open this event at this year's Global Landscapes Forum. We could not be in a more appropriate stage to talk about Severe Amazonia. As we all know, the Amazon is the largest rainforest in the world, and it continues to be threatened and impacted by rampant deforestation and forest degradation. Through Servir Amazonia, a 5-year program which started in 2019 and runs to 2023, we're bringing together local knowledge and some of the world's best science in geospatial Earth observation technology to improve the capacity of local actors to harness this type of information and foster sustainable natural resource management through the Amazon region. As the Alliance of Biodiversity International and SEAT, part of CGIAR, we are honored to lead the Servir Amazonia program, working closely with our partners in the region, the Spatial Informatics Group in the US, Conservación Amazónica in Peru, the Institute of Forest and Agriculture Management and Certification, IMAFLORA in Brazil, and Fundación Ecociencia in Ecuador. Servir Amazonia is only one of 5 Servir hubs currently operating around the world as part of Servir Global. This groundbreaking initiative connects Usaid's development network with NASA science, technology, and extensive satellite data. Earth observations and geospatial information play a critical role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and impacts of climate change by monitoring deforestation and its causes and improving the management of protected areas. We are very glad to join you today in this important webinar to share our perspectives, learn from you, and account for lessons learned and experience on how geospatial technologies and information can improve evidence-based decision-making, which is critical to protecting the Amazon while ensuring the livelihoods and well-being of its residents. I wish you a fruitful discussion. Thanks.
Good morning, and thank you to our organisers and the host, Director General Restrepo, and the Alliance of Biodiversity International and the International Centre for Tropical Agriculture. My name is Gavin Schmidt, and I'm currently NASA's Senior Advisor on Climate Change. From this perch, I've been working with people across the agency and its partners to see what NASA has been doing on climate, assess where we are doing well, and see where there might be room to improve. The one thing that is immediately clear is that the quality and breadth of data that NASA is bringing to the discussions on climate change is unique and world-class. From land cover change seen by Landsat, fires seen by MODIS, gravity seen by GRACE, and sea level seen by multiple laser altimeter missions, this data gives an unprecedented depth of information about our changing planet. The changes we are seeing are caused by many factors. Climate change for sure, driven by increasing levels of greenhouse gases, but also other human activities. Urbanization, deforestation, mining, habitat destruction, and in some places, regrowth and recovery. New data streams will provide even more data on soil moisture, the rainforest canopy, land use change, glaciers, and surface water. This NASA observational data can help us see what has happened across the world, not least in Amazonia, where unique pressures are threatening a unique and tremendous environment, one that I've been fortunate enough to visit via 5 of the Amazonian countries, including Guyana, where I saw firsthand the positive impacts that residential solar power and cell phones had for connecting previously isolated communities to the world. Furthermore, NASA resources are also being used to make forecasts of weather, but also fire and smoke and possible responses of the ecosystems to climate change. These projections and data are fundamental to the conclusions reached in the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which was just released last month. But with this veritable deluge of data and simulations, it is clear that it is not as easily accessible as it should be. There are too many data streams that are too often not integrated and not comparable with key measures of socioeconomic and population activity. Getting these resources into the hands of local stakeholders and decision makers has to be a high priority for NASA and its partners moving forward. And that's where projects like Severe come up. Networks that are plugged into the local communities that are actually going to use the data to improve how they make key decisions. Cross-agency partnerships that mean that different parts of the US government can work together for a common aim. Partnerships that include governments and NGOs and local scientists that ensures that we don't simply parachute in and then leave. These networks can help co-produce the kinds of products and services that none of us would be able to do alone. For over 16 years, Severe has invested in these networks all across the world, building a space-to-village connection that has the potential to radically change lives and outcomes for the better. I'm tremendously excited to see the breadth of activities being put together by Severe Amazonia Hub, and I wish you all the best of luck in tackling these challenging problems. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Gene Thomas, Usaid Mission Director in Peru. I'm pleased to participate in this Global Landscape Forum to discuss and position the use of geospatial technology and the science of Earth observation to improve the monitoring of deforestation, droughts, fires, and floods to reduce the occurrence of environmental disasters and the effects of climate change, and to better understand how we can improve evidence-based environmental decision-making to underpin sustainable solutions to protect the biodiversity of the Amazon. Climate change is a top priority for the US government. Its impacts are accelerating. Just this year, the world has had a dizzying pace of one climate change impact after another. We've had punishing heat waves, powerful storms, mega droughts, unprecedented floods, and catastrophic wildfires. The urgency for climate change adaptation and mitigation is now. No one is immune from the effects of climate change, but it is the poor, the disadvantaged, and the marginalized that are the most vulnerable. At Usaid, we are approaching climate change with ambition and whole-of-agency approach. We are taking action with our partner countries to protect critical ecosystems, transition to renewable energy, build resilience against the negative impacts of climate change, and mobilize public and private finance at the scale necessary to meet our global climate goals. In doing so, we are partnering with local communities, indigenous peoples, women, and youth to lead and sustain climate actions. At Usaid Peru, we are investing in natural climate solutions that conserve the biodiversity and carbon within key landscapes in the Amazon region, and that safeguard sustainable livelihoods for local and indigenous peoples. We have a narrow window for action if we are to avert the worst impacts of climate change, and this urgency will be reflected in USAID's forthcoming climate strategy, which will guide the next decade of our work to address this crisis. I'm sure that this forum will be very interesting and useful for all the participants who will benefit from the opinions and discussions of experts on this subject. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. The way we've organized this this session is really to try and provoke a conversation around the ideas relating to the use of geospatial information for better decision making, but also for supporting leveling up the playing field and stakeholder engagement and empowering different stakeholders to participate in processes. We've organized the structure of this into two panels. And these panels will each go for about 25 minutes, and we'll follow the panel discussions by opening up the floor to the audience and be taking questions for the different panelists. As we go through this, think through your questions and please submit them to us. And we'll take them up in a subsequent discussion. We decided not to break it up into panel discussion followed by questions because we felt that this would make a much better flow of this session for the format, and that's the way we hope it works out. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first panel, which is titled From Space to Village. The moderator is Maria Elena Gutierrez. Maria Elena is the Director of Conservación Amazónica, ACA, in Peru. Maria Elena is an industrial engineer by training with a master's degree in sustainable development and conservation biology from the University of Maryland in the USA. She has more than 15 years of experience working in environmental conservation, climate change, circular economy, economic integration, and international negotiations. She has experience working with the private sector, government, international cooperation, and civil society actors to implement local, regional, and national stakeholders. Maria Elena, I'll let you introduce your panel and your panelists. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Lou. And you just missed that I also a mother. So I'm really concerned that we are reaching this tipping point, and I am amazed to be with you today in this panel from the space to village. It's amazing because we have 4 panelists, amazing panelists. 2 of them, they coming from the engineering world, from NASA, from the best place that they could develop these technologies. But also we are going to have 2 amazing panelists from the village. They are representative of the Indigenous Federation, and they are really expert on Indigenous matters. So I want to introduce you first to Eric Anderson. He's an associate chief scientist and disaster team lead from Servir Science Coordination Office. He's also a member of the NASA Marshall Space Flight Center. He has a great experience on GIS and remote sensing for applied earth and environmental science, including natural hazards. He began working with Servir at the Mesoamerica Hub, and more recently support Servir global activities. Thank you, Eric, for being with us today. Please turn on your camera. And also let me introduce David Sa. He will be with us today, and he is a managing principal of the Spatial Informatics Group company. He's also professor and director of the Geospatial Analysis Lab from the University of San Francisco. He has been broadly trained as environmental scientist with expertise in a number of areas, including landscape ecology, ecosystem ecology, hydrology, ecosystem modeling, natural hazard modeling, and different geospatial analysis. Thank you, David. And then also we are going to have Monica Romo. She is a regional Amazon environment specialist from Usaid, from the South American region. She has more than 30 years of experience designing projects, methodologies, strategic planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of conservation and sustainable development projects in the Amazon. And of course, she has a great experience on Indigenous people and Native communities matters. And finally, we are going to have Julio Cusurici. He's the Indigenous leader of the Native community in Peru. He's the president of FENAMAT. FENAMAT is la Federación Nativa del Río Madre de Dios y Afluentes. He works to assure the empowerment and active participation of the Indigenous people in the defending their rights and the conservation of their territories. Thank you, 4 of you, to be with us this morning. And I would like you to first of all, talk about a general question. Considering that we are talking about how advancement in geospatial and earth observation technology are enhancing forest monitoring, disaster forecasting, drawing on innovation in remote sensing and satellite images. How have you been using these technologies lately? And what principal advances you have been able to make? Please, I would like to invite first Eric for 2 minutes to answer this question. Eric?
Thank you so much for the question and leading the conversation, Maria Elena. And thanks to Lou for moderating. What inspiring opening remarks from CIAT, from NASA, and from USAID. I'm excited to share part of Servir's over 16-year journey on lessons to make their satellite mission data free and open as well. We can do more together with this monitoring. I think another key is that Servir is in a position with its partnership with USAID, NASA, hubs and its partners to connect sustainable development priorities to climate change adaptation mitigation plans in the Amazon. Some initial successes along monitoring greenhouse gas emissions in the land and agriculture sectors comes thanks to this 40+ year consistent record of Landsat and other complementary satellites from the likes of European Space Agency, via the Sentinel series. We're looking at decadal to 5-year and now 1 year consistent monitoring of land cover and land cover change. This is co-developing this with partners such as Ministries of Environment and Departments of Forests, is setting up our partners to play on the stage of climate risk financing, the carbon market, and providing the necessary MRV tools. On the disaster risk reduction side, we've seen quite a few advances in monitoring the extent of water and forecasting stream flow and floods transboundary. You may think this is disconnected from GHG and climate mitigation, but in fact, nature-based solutions can come about through co-benefits of data-driven conservation that can serve to mitigate floods and landslides and also mitigate carbon. Thanks again for the question, and looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Eric. David, please jump up to the conversation.
I will. It's always hard to follow Eric. You know, when I think of technology, I really think of people, leveraging people's expertise, leveraging people's knowledge, leveraging people's ability to do something on the ground that's meaningful. For all the things that Eric talked about, how do you actually do that? And how do you leverage that? Open data is one of the key things that allows us to get there. And without open data, we're not going to be able to achieve these large-scale impacts that we're driving towards. Connected to that, we need the ability to get the input from people on the ground in a robust way with those folks that are able to compute it using those observations. So the idea of collecting unstructured information from the ground is a critical technology and need that needs to be able to be accelerated across the board. What's nice about Severe and NASA and the partners associated with them, whether it's FAO, WRI, or FAO, or the variety of other folks associated with the Severe network, is there's a need and requirement and request and push towards collecting that information and sharing it. Second component is on the compute side, right? When you have the best computers we have are people, but the ability to give people the chance to take their knowledge and stick it in a local place where the analytics could be shared across the board is the next generation of technology push. Not only do we need open data, we need open analytics, we need open compute in an environment where everybody could have access to it in a free and transparent way. I'm going to pause there just to make sure we have enough room for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, David. How about you, Monica?
Well, I'm not a technology person, as they describe very well all the advances in technology, but I would say it from the side of users. I think the monitoring, reporting, and verification really promote the use of images. And also the fact that more and more images are open have spread the use. There's a lot of platform now. Well, we have supported Global Forest Watch and others. There's a widespread use of images, and now more and more platforms to use them for alerts and for use of the people, actually. I would just make 2-3 examples that we have supported with USAID. For example, the Geobosques, that is the platform used by the Minister of Environment in Peru. It is part of the national program for forest conservation that support 200 communities. And the use of that open platform where you can have alerts of deforestation, of new roads open in the Amazon, is open to everybody, for government, for normal people. And me, I'm registered in the alerts too. But more and more the indigenous peoples are using it. And I understand also that the program is training the people from the federations to use that to monitor their lands. Another example is the SOMAI platform that we also supported by IPAM, is an NGO. And they have made these platforms that inform on the precipitation, fire, deforestation, and enterprises, industries, also to be used in a cell phone. that is a great advance because now everybody has cell phones, when not every place in the Amazon, because still connection is a problem, but everybody is using more and more the applications in the cell phone, so they can know what is going on related to these aspects, but also they can feed the application and that is sent to the platform, and that can be used by some people and also reported to authorities.
Yes.
Lately, also, we have supported IDESEP. IDESEP has a platform for alerts in different aspects. IDESEP is the National Federation of Indigenous in Peru. They have a system called Early Warning and Action System. That have the basic maps, all the layers of the limits, deforestation, but also they are including cultural, political, and health aspects in this platform. The people from the communities feed with information, and it has been of great use by the Department of Health in these times of COVID. Actually, it was very reliable. So
Yeah, for sure.
I think the widespread use of this is more and more helping to take decisions.
Thank you, Monica. And from the user perspective, from the indigenous people, I would like to ask Julio. Julio, ¿estás con nosotros? Cuéntanos cómo estas tecnologías han sido.
Julio, are you with us? How do you use this technology? How our compatriots from indigenous zones use this technology? Julio?
Is Julio with us? Hello, good morning. Hello, Julio. How are you? I want, first of all, to thank. It's very important for us, this technology that we are developing through partners, and I believe that we are using the Flores Lind technology, and this is important because it provides warnings of what's happening in our communities, but this comes also through a cell phone towards a piece of equipment that the organization has in the city. With this, through this data, they were able to check that there are problems in a territory, and together with the authorities, we can take some action. For example, illegal logging, the illicit activities, attempts to take land without owning property or land in the territories. This is very important, and it's technology. And right now, we are working, strengthening these capacities of knowledge, this technology for our brothers, the indigenous people, our own people, so that they can be drivers and also participate in the governance of the territory. Now we also have Servir Amazonia using more advanced technologies so that this can help us as indigenous peoples. Also, they go through territorial control. It helps mitigate the environment, but it's very important when we want to establish order in a territory due to different situations that affect the territories. So the community, the leaders, the organization is at risk because facing those illegal agents is it's a big concern. So it's very important what we're doing, how with AMAT and What's more important, the human resource that has training will stay with us in the community, and that will help us to continue to monitor the territories, and eventually this work will mitigate the environment, and this is work not only for indigenous peoples but also for all of mankind. This is what I can summarize of what we are doing with our organization. Julio, that's completely true.
Of the illegal situations, the deforestation you have to face, that, and technology is one of the best ally on this. And now I would like, to continue this discussion, I would like to share with you a video on regarding how we serve a geospatial service that we, Conservación Amazónica, ACA, have developed with Servir Amazonia, that show us how the latest technology support the detection of illegal mining activities in Peru. This is, and in spite of the cloudy weather, this is RAMI, the radar mining monitoring. Please, the organizers, could you please share this video?
La minería ilegal es una de las actividades más destructivas en la Amazonía surperuana. En los últimos 30 años se han perdido más de 100.000 hectáreas de bosque primario en territorios indígenas, áreas naturales protegidas y concesiones forestales.
This activity directly affects the health of people and biodiversity due to the devastation of natural ecosystems and the contamination of water sources that directly hits plants and animals which are part of the diet of the local population. Remote sensing has been key to monitor the progress of mining since its effects on the forest are visible from space. However, the presence of clouds in the Amazon, especially during the wet season, limits traditional monitoring to 6 or 7 months, but the mining activities occur all year long. In order to solve the challenge, we developed a service concept, RAMI, a satellite monitoring tool that uses radar images to establish a near real-time alert system that improves the precision, efficiency, and accuracy of the detection of new illegal mining sites. The Environmental Prosecutor's Office of Madre de Dios is already using these and other tools to plan field operations and to fight illegal mining. This tool fills the information gaps that existed during the rainy months, since it allows constant monitoring of the forest cover. Based on my experience, the RAMI platform will provide special data about forestation that is due to mining and will complement the different web platforms. So I invite you to use and review the RAMI platform and be the eyes of our forest. With the tool, we can share key information on the status of gold mining in the Peruvian Amazon in real time. Members of civil society, representatives of indigenous organizations, and other forest users.
Amazed because the application have been working with the Ministry of Environment in Peru, and also been using by the Environmental Prosecutor Office. So now I have just a few minutes, but I would like to invite also Eric again, that to discuss just for 1 minute at least, to know what have you learned over the years working with Servir and trying to connect space to village, and what has been achieved and what the challenge remains to be overcome. Please, Eric, could you please share this in 1 minute? Thank you.
Thank you, and what a great video to summarize the challenges on monitoring forest resources and the threats that illegal mining present. I think this example encapsulates some of the challenges that remain to overcome. Again, one of the most important things we've learned along the way is designing geospatial services for impact, for sustainability and replicability. I'm using other people's words here because they're great words, and I'll thank the other panelists for this, for these ideas too. One of the key examples in this video was seeing how Rami plugs in directly to the Ministry of Environment's environmental protection workflow. There are specific actions, decisions and actions that are made with or without this satellite information. If we can provide better satellite information, whether from an optical series of satellites like Landsat or synthetic aperture radar like Sentinel-1 and the forthcoming NISAR mission in the next coming years, we're doing a better job at empowering communities to monitor and manage their natural resources. One other opportunity to sink our teeth into is for additional knowledge sharing. From the global Surveyor perspective, the Surveyor Amazonia Hub is collaborating very meaningfully with the Surveyor West Africa Hub on issues related to mining, monitoring and detection of illegal mining. This is not just a problem in the Amazonia. So I'd like to thank all of our partners and collaborators here in Surveyor Amazonia for their contributions to helping address this challenge in West Africa, and likewise acknowledge our West Africa colleagues for sharing methods and platforms that I think have made a difference in the Amazonia region as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And David, please join us. You are a professor, but also you are engaged in the private sector. So how can we assure that user organizations can benefit from geospatial technologies over a long term beyond the duration of a project? How business model can work for all?
That's a great question. That's a complicated question. There's a lot of folks in the geospatial industry that struggle with that on a daily basis. There's three basic pathways that you typically see. The first is that the basic infrastructure typically is supported by large state agencies. For example, when GPS first came out, it was limited to the military. But once it was opened up and everybody could have access to it, huge industries grew around it. So these sovereigns understood that by creating and allowing those geospatial technologies to exist and thrive, they were able to create economies both locally and abroad. Landsat Archive was the next example where that occurred. That pathway forward is critical for the sustainability within the private sector and within the sustainability of all the services we talked about. And you can hear some of Eric's comments that describe some of the details associated with it. The second pathway that you typically see is within an organization, does it actually impact operations? Can you improve the way an organization operates with better information, with the ability to make more precise decisions in a way that allows the organization to operate more effectively or more efficiently? If you're able to get into that angle or that stream of an organization or a business, then you have a market opportunity that allows it to be economically viable over time. And when you look at the services that we're developing across the region within Severe and some of the other programs, the idea is to get that vein plugged right into the operations side of whether it's a ministry or a local company or a local NGO in order to make more precise decisions that are more effective. The third component, which is really important, is on the PR side or marketing side. How do you actually show or communicate the successes your organization is having in a way that it exemplifies all the great benefits you have within an operation, within your operations? Geospatial technology allows you to do a lot of that. And so a lot of the private sector are dependent on the first thing I talked about. The second thing in terms of operations, that's how they make sure it's long-term viable, and how they showcase it to their shareholders in the community is through that third vein, which is on the communication piece. And I'll pause there.
Thank you, David. And how about you, Monica? What have been your experience in promoting the use of these kind of technologies in a development context? What is easy and what is difficult to achieve?
Well, I will touch some things that I think Servir has already thought on, and how some examples of what we have done. As you know, in the Amazon, we have problems with communication, internet, cell phones. I think that's a big bottleneck when trying to use these technologies. I think that technology per se, images, GPS, all that is very advanced. That's not the bottleneck. The bottleneck is for how to get to the user, and in this case, in the Amazon, because the internet connections. We have made an effort to provide antennas to some communities, cell phones. Everybody's using cell phones now, and that is still a big challenge in the Amazon. The second, I will say, is the capabilities to use technology, science and technology. We are still need a lot of support to improve those capabilities. I always mention that education is the basic thing for everything. And I will just give you that data, not to depress you, but to see how big is the challenge and what we can do. In Peru, below 70% of students 12 years old pass the evaluation of science and technology. In the Amazon, in some regions in the Amazon, that percentage can get to 2-3%. So that is really a challenge, the educations on science and technology. I'm not talking about the cities, that also is very low in Peru, but education on science and technology is a huge challenge. We're trying to do a lot of training to the federations, to the young people. Young people are very interested in technology, and they want to use more applications, cell phones applications, platforms. And also you have to have, like that you have done with FENAMAT, have the intermediaries, in that case, intermediaries between the village, the federations, and the government, or the space intermediate village, because sometimes in the village there are not all the technologies or the access, but invest in improve the capabilities for technology in all areas.
Yes.
And the other thing is the market that also David mentioned. The market, the user of that has to really find a benefit on that, and that is operational for them. They have the information that they do something with that, and that makes some improvement in their rights, in their operations, in the way they work. And that needs to be very obvious from the user from the beginning. I will stop there.
Monica. No, yes, there are many things and important. Sad that I have to cut you right now, but I would like to talk to Julio. Julio, como lo has mencionado, FENAMAT ya viene usando estas tecnologías geoespaciales y en
geospace technologies. What would your organization FENAMAT need so that it can use and integrate all these technologies in the priority topics that you have for defending your territories? Julio. This information is very important. We believe that it's not only to provide training on these technologies, but also implement the technologies, providing more equipment to more communities, to more users, and the other is strengthening the community and organization. That is why sometimes many initiatives don't get any results when it's not possible to do the complete work. We provide training. We have a person, a farmer who's well trained, but he has no resources. He doesn't have driver or equipment to monitor his area. He cannot store information. So I believe that that's another challenge to see how we can have more equipment, more devices. I believe that's important in order to reach the objective that we have established.
We noticed that we have achieved a lot of progress in terms of technology, and that we build these amazing partnerships with NASA, Servir, USAID, CIAT, ACA, the federations, Indigenous Federation, but we still having many things to do in terms of data from the fields, in terms of open access, in terms of connections, improve connections, but also to build capacities on the users. The users as Julio mentioned, not only education, but also capabilities, equipment that they could keep using this. And also pandemic have teach us a lot of things regarding technology. And we believe that this is the way, and this is a really good tool and good ally, the technology, to really let us protect the Amazon, our earth, our home. Back to you, Lou. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. All right, thank you very much, and I really appreciate your moderation of this session. I also want to thank the panelists, Eric, David, Julio, and Monica. I think we have some really nice insights from your interventions here, and I think you've covered a bunch of important topics that I hope we can get back to in the question and answer session at the end of this. I'd like now to introduce the second panel, which is called Addressing Climate Change Challenges Together. And this panel will be moderated by Marina Piatto. Marina is the Executive Secretary of Imaflora in Brazil. She's been working for more than 15 years in the areas of agricultural value chains and climate change. She has been dedicated to building networks and strategies to increase deforestation-free production, in addition to fostering low-carbon agricultural practices and social rights in the commodity sectors, such as soy and livestock in the Amazon rainforest and in the Cerrado of Brazil. She graduated from agricultural engineering at the University of Sao Paulo. Marina has a master's in tropical agriculture from the University of Bonn, Germany. Marina, over to you to present your panel and introduce the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lou. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to be here. Thank you to CIAT and us and all partners here. This panel, we are going to talk about climate change. One second, please. The panel is about addressing climate change challenges together. And the objective is to discuss the decision-making aspects of geospatial technologies in the context of climate change. Decision makers, we need to think broadly, not only policymakers, but also individuals with authority to utilize information. Those who make the day-to-day administrative operational decisions for governments, non-government institutions, companies, associations, representatives of indigenous people, traditional people, local and subnational government bodies. So I will introduce the speakers here. First is Manuel Pulgar Vidal, leader of Climate and Energy Global Practice at WWF and former Minister of Environment of Peru. Marcela Quintero, Director, Multifunctional Landscape Research Area, Alliance of Biodiversity International, and the International Center of Tropical Agriculture, CIAT. The third one is Luis Felipe Duchicella, I don't know exactly how to pronounce, Senior Advisor for Indigenous Peoples Issues at USAID, and Marion Adeney, Program Officer Andes Amazon from Moore Foundation. I'd like to welcome all of the speakers, and I would like to address the first question to Manuel. Manuel, as a former Minister of Environment of Peru and leader of climate and energy at WWF, a huge NGO in the world, is there any difference between addressing climate change as a decision maker and addressing other challenges? What do we need to do more so that decision makers take on the board scientific evidence, how they will take like a real-time information in their decision, how they are going to use maps. So how we can use all these scientific evidences and link with the decision makers process.
Thank you, Marina, for the question, and thank you to you all for inviting me to be part of this panel. So look, Marina, all challenges are complex, and we know that we are facing different kinds of challenges. It is not only about climate change, it is also about nature loss. Now we have the health crisis, among some others. So the complexity of those crises and the level of emergency make us to recognize that we should move our actions with a sense of urgency. So what is the big challenge for the decision maker? It is to recognize that the best science, it is that one that first could address the challenges and as much can integrate the different challenges at the same time as better. So the point is that we don't need to have information, data, or science or technology for climate that it is separate for nature and that is separate for health. The point is how much that technology could really help us to address the different challenges. A second element, it is to have technology that could fit with needs. And this is important because it is not just about decision makers. It is a multi-stakeholder needs. So for example, if we are thinking about monitoring by indigenous people, or if we are thinking about park guards, the point is how much that technology could be useful for those multi-stakeholders, those actors in the different levels. The third concept or the third element, it is that this technology must be able to respond to threats. What are the current threats of the Amazon? For sure, climate change, but also illegal logging, illegal mining, fires, among some others. So the point is how much the technology could address those. And finally, the technology must respond to the current reality and to the future models for the Amazon or for the landscape, whatever it could be, that landscape. So we know, for example, that the Amazon is getting its tipping point. We know what are the models by IPCC, what it could be the future of the Amazon, the savanization of the Amazon, among some others. But on the other hand, and this is related again to needs, that technology should help decision makers to address their own obligation. And this is also national determined contribution and BSAPs for biodiversity, plus nation-based solutions as an opportunity. So if we are able to combine those four elements, I think that could be called, as I used to do it some months ago, an Amazon appropriate technology. So an Amazon appropriate technology, it is that one that it is able to put together those four elements that I just mentioned.
Great. Manuel, it's great that you mentioned that these all technologies must be used by all stakeholders, all decision makers from many levels, and the combination of all these 4 points you brought. I would like to bring Marcela to this conversation. Marcela, you have a successful experience in influencing Peruvian policy. Also, you have been working in Peru, and tell us briefly about your experience. What are your good practices to influence decision makers with climate change science and evidence, such as geospatial data and information? Mostly, how climate change is such a complex topic. How we translate all these science-based solutions to the decision makers have like a easy and fast decision in the building policies. Could you bring us your experience in that, please?
Thank you, and also thanks for the invitation to this conversation. And I want to start, to talk about in general terms, how we can not influence, but how we can help and contribute to policy making from the science perspective. And some of the lessons is that when working with policymakers at different levels, it's key to start understanding what is their long-term vision, what is the primary objective that they have in their sector or in their territory and so on. And based on that, I think it's super important to make an effort as a scientist to understand what is their need, what is impeding them to implement concrete actions. And I think this is the word that Manuel was saying a lot, what is their need? So I want to bring an example of in Peru many years ago when the government wanted to support payment for ecosystem services, including payment for mitigation climate change. And in that moment, the aim was clear. They want to support that. They want to promote it, but it was not clear what information was needed to really trigger those processes and then to have the widespread implementation of payment for ecosystem services. So we started that dialogue, and at the end we said, okay, I think we don't have a clear understanding on what are the key bottlenecks that are impeding the widespread application of payment for ecosystem services in Peru. So we as a scientist needed to respond to that with a different assessment that was very different than what we used to do, to try to identify systematically where were those bottlenecks in the practice and what of those bottlenecks could be tackled by policymakers, because not all bottlenecks can be tackled by them. So we make that study together. We identify together with different actors what actions can be done to remove those bottlenecks. And those that could be removed by policymakers were later considered in the formulation of a new law for promoting payment for ecosystem services. So here, I wanted to bring that example because I think this is the same approach that needs to be applicable when developing GIS and remote sensing tools. What is the information that these tools can provide to remove bottlenecks that impede concrete action for tackling climate change, for the conservation of natural resources, and also to impede the degradation of those natural resources? Because we know that natural capital is key to keep or to maintain the adaptation capacity of our local communities. So what the user needs, and instead of asking ourselves as scientists what is interesting for us.
Great, Marcela, it's true. It's essential to, first, we need to make this assessment of the bottlenecks and after decide what the science needs to do to support this decision. And sometimes we make the other way around, we decide the scientific pieces and is not really well connected with the bottlenecks that we need to remove. So great contribution is very aligned with Manuel, like putting theory in practice, connecting theory, because like it was interesting, the video we saw before, that we really have a narrow window for action due to climate change. So science must be very precise. The geospatial tools need to be very precise with the needs of the decision makers, because we have no time to lose in this climate emergency. I would like to bring to the floor Luis Felipe. Luis, welcome. In the last few years, there has been a huge change in the discussion of indigenous territories in Amazon Basin. In Brazil, we have all the same discussion here, very important. From being a kind of afterthought, a niche topic, to being in the front, in the center of the topics today. As a senior advisor for indigenous people issues at USAID, could you talk to us about this progress that has been made in the dialogue, the challenges, and what do you like to see happening next? And after that, I would like to also listen from you. What about the deforestation rate increase and climate change? How this is impacting those territories and also the traditional communities that it's living there? Welcome.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Marina. Very, very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So I think that indigenous peoples globally have struggled during more than 40 years to gain recognition of their rights. And they have been quite successful in that globally, with the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples in 2007 and other constitutional changes in some countries, etc. However, what has not happened yet is the actual and effective application of those rights, especially over land and territories and natural resources. And I think the reason for that is, there are three reasons for that in my view. First reason is that there is a lack of political will and decision on the part of national governments to fully support indigenous people's rights, to recognize their rights beyond the beyond the legal aspects and make it real. This is to me a huge problem, not only in the Amazon basin, but really globally. The second thing that is needed is a more robust, consistent capacity development program for all stakeholders, including governments, but particularly for indigenous peoples to strengthen their governance structure and to really empower them to do the kind of things that they need to do. And finally, they need to strengthen their own economies through innovative economic models. I believe that indigenous peoples have been the stewards of fragile ecosystems such as the Amazon basin, the Congo basin, etc., through thousands of years. And now, especially to address the climate crisis, I think that the world needs to move very quickly to empower indigenous peoples, strengthen their governance, and allow the indigenous peoples to take the lead in the modern world in order to continue to conserve these critical ecosystems that we still have remaining in the world.
Yes, Luis. Yesterday, I have a daughter, she's 4 years old, and yesterday she told me that the indigenous peoples are the angels of the Amazon. And it was so nice to hear this. There is a hope. Huh? The young people bring us hope to continue. So thank you. I would like also to keep with you with another question, Luis, and also bring maybe Marcela to the floor as a woman and as a researcher. How we can connect all these issues of tackling climate change, technologies, and bring the gender issue as a transversal topic, also in the communities, in the research, in WWF projects, or in the decision makers, in the policy, how we bring the gender issue, as we know that this will be gender and the woman will be very affected by climate change too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks for, I wanted to say that I'm a woman and not necessarily I'm a gender expert, but my answer is going to be based on what I have seen also in the practice and also in other projects that have incorporated seriously the gender component in relation to climate change. So first I want to start saying, let me start saying on what, I mean, what we need in terms of tools for climate change, and then how we can incorporate gender there. When I was thinking in the conversation today, I made myself that question, and I was saying, okay, we already know that climate change is happening. So there are many tools projecting how climate change is going to be in the next year, in 20 years, in 50 years. So we already know that, and sometimes we invest a lot, keep investing a lot of time on those projections, but climate change is happening. So I think we need now more tools that can help communities and different actors to anticipate better changes on phenomena that are sensitive to climate change, like, for example, deforestation, flooding, extreme droughts, landslides, that we know are sensitive to climate change and affect directly the livelihoods of people in the Amazon. So here is where it comes the gender component, because how those phenomena and changes in those phenomena given by or as a result of climate change are perceived and affect the communities, I'm sure has a gender dimension. And this is something that we don't know sometimes well. I mean, how, for example, deforestation or flooding or extreme droughts in some areas can affect women that have different responsibilities in their households, right, or in their livelihoods. So we haven't yet incorporated enough that gender dimension on understanding well how those phenomena will affect differently men and women, and I will bring also here youth. So my message is that let's work on tools that can help us to anticipate to those changes in our ecosystem that affect directly livelihoods, and let understand how those effects can be for different type of population, for women, men, and youth. And the second thing that I wanted to say is that this is precisely what we saw today from Servir, that Servir is really focusing on understanding better those phenomena and providing tools to, for example, see what is happening with the fires, what is happening with the flooding, what is happening with deforestation that we know are sensitive to climate. And then I think we need to advance now that to another stage and see, okay, and how those phenomena are affecting different women and men, and how these tools can be gender sensitive and not only climate sensitive.
Yeah, Luis, can you make a short contribution, because we need to get Marion on the floor also to bring her experience on different topics.
Sure, yeah, very quickly. I think that in the case of indigenous peoples, I think it's important to keep in mind that if their rights as indigenous peoples are not recognized and are not effectively put in practice, then none of the population segments of the indigenous peoples their rights can be addressed or improved. Youth, elder people, gender, LGBTIQ people, persons with disabilities, and other vulnerable groups within the indigenous peoples. So I see that that's a mistake that is commonly made to try to impose gender approaches to indigenous people from the outside without first really ensuring that their rights as peoples have been recognized, because they are nations. They have their own culture, they have territories, they have their own cosmovision, they have their own language. So, it's a huge mistake in my view, especially this is done by many NGOs and with good intentions maybe, so I would really stress the need to first let's join efforts. And I think Servir is an excellent example, joint efforts in order to address the issues of indigenous people's rights first, and together then they will lead the way and they will figure out how to include effectively, women and youth and other groups of their population segments that need to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Yeah, I agree. We have a lot to do with all of these vulnerable populations. Thank you for, and I would like to bring Marion. Marion is from Moore Foundation, Moore is helping for a long time, Andes, Amazon projects. Welcome, Marion. I would like to hear from you. You are developing programs for a long time, like climate change related with forestry, agriculture, traditional communities, and how do we cooperate smartly and accelerate the achievements of results on the ground? Now, what we need, like we still did not recognize the indigenous people's rights, and then we want to talk with gender, and then climate change, global is warming, agriculture is being impacting, everything together. Né? What's about this? It's about to improve dialogue, to enhance commitment, to get an agreement. Could you bring us your point of view on that, please?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I'm quite excited to be on this panel, and during quite a few years of working on this issue, both at Moore and previously at Usaid Peru, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we get from information to impact. And as Manuel pointed out, it is complex and it involves a lot of bottlenecks, as we've also heard, and many stakeholders. So I think one thing that we've learned and continue to learn is we can't assume that information leads to impact. And so as a result, we need to design information and tools with the end impact in mind. And that design process, which I know is a fundamental tenet of Servir, involves designing, thinking about both the end users, the types of information that are needed, the systems that will be involved, and the processes and people across scales that will be involved. So, for example, when we're working with communities that are on the front lines on the ground, we need to design tools in collaboration with them and that allow them to translate the information in ways that are useful and important, especially when we're considering indigenous people and traditional knowledge. Also, we need to remember to integrate systems. So we heard about MINAM and having information involved in their workflows. We also need to think about other systems that we might not have taken into account. For example, how do we use data generated from these types of platforms to inform legal processes and legal systems? And how do we actually work with, for example, indigenous people and youth to participate in those processes? Finally, just a couple things. We need to know what are the key actors and leverage points within those systems that can make that change. And especially from a funder's perspective, for those of you designing these programs, we need to think ahead about how we measure the impact of what we're doing. Because often we do have an impact, we don't know how to capture it. And that's always a question that comes up. Thanks.
Thank you a lot, Marion. Yes, it's key to monitor impact, even it's not as fast as we want the results. I would like to thank you. We are advanced in the time. I would like to thank all speakers and highlight this importance of Servir to connect the space to village and also the village to decision makers. This will, we hope that this project will accelerate all this process and we tackle climate change as soon as possible. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Marina, for moderating this panel. And thank you to all the panelists. We really appreciate your contributions, Luis Felipe, Marian, Manuel, sorry, I just turned the page the wrong way. Oh, sorry, Marcella. Yes, Marcella. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate it. We have some questions, and I would like to point out that the floor is open. So let's please put your questions in the chat, and they'll be guided to me, and I'll be asking them to folks. Just to kick it off a little bit, so several people have made reference to the need for geospatial information and these tools to really address real needs and understand, to start from a point of view of understanding the needs of stakeholders. And so I would like to come back to the point of the importance of independent monitoring. David referred to the fact that much of the infrastructure is put in place by governments, and it's, you know, there was a real explosion when there was open data and it became available for others to use. And he pointed to the importance of the need for developing open analytics. But Marian, you've been involved in monitoring and protection of indigenous areas and protected natural areas in the Amazon. Could you share any experiences you might have on the importance of independent monitoring, not non-governmental monitoring, and the importance of governmental monitoring in this, and maybe the difference between the two and how they all fit in on this? And then I'll come to a couple other viewpoints on this panel for the same question. So, but let's start with Marian, please.
Great, thank you so much for the question. I think that independent monitoring is absolutely critical, and government monitoring, when it exists, provides an amazing baseline. So, for example, in Brazil, the work of INPE over the years has lent an official layer and a time series that's been very important. But we also see that sometimes those government processes and monitoring systems can be undermined or weakened with changing politics, availability of funds, et cetera. And independent systems can very much contribute to holding those accountable, providing a cross-reference. I think it's worth mentioning Mapiomas, which has been really a collective effort with open source data, open source code that has gone on to inform many different types of other efforts. And in some cases, it's actually now being adopted by governments as somewhat official data. So I think we have a tension between useful iteration, having multiple checks on data and systems, but not actually reimagining the wheel every time. So we need to have that tension between good iteration and not repeating efforts. And one of the things I've seen with a lot of the severe programs that are coming out is that they're building on both the government data and the independent data, which is another important benefit of having both.
Great, thank you very much. Let me ask Julio, your viewpoint on say community-based monitoring and integrating community-based monitoring with some of these more formal monitoring, and also the importance of independent monitoring in protected natural areas and indigenous territories in particular. You know, if you could share your views on this. Julio? Is he still online? Yeah, I see he's online. You can unmute your microphone, please.
Luis, are you referring to me or?
Julio from FENAMAD.
Oh, Julio, okay.
I'll come to you in a minute, Luis Felipe. Okay, well, I guess let's have perhaps somebody could work with Julio to get him back online. Luis Felipe, would you like to take this question, please? So the importance of independent monitoring and community-based monitoring and that.
Yes. No, absolutely necessary. And I think that the monitoring should start at the community level. Absolutely. And you know, just as Julio was saying in his prior intervention, you know, they need not only capacity building, but also proper, you know, equipment and computers, etc., and the means to implement that. I think that's the best way to monitor, you know, progress in terms of you know, controlling deforestation and other climate change objectives. The problem that I have seen is perhaps is two divergent too much of divergent systems and lack of complementarity or lack of ways to talk to have different systems, talk to each other and be able to complement. So that would be something that would be, a huge improvement to be able to standardize more and to have a more fluid way of, collecting and transferring data among the different systems, including the independent monitoring systems and also the governmental ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marcela, you've been involved with a lot of participatory research and helping communities develop ways to understand and monitor their resources. Would you like to share some experiences on the importance of community-based monitoring and how they interact perhaps with more formal government types of monitoring?
Yeah, Lou, thanks for the question. And I would like to start saying that, local and community-based monitoring should not be conflicting with, for example, national level government monitoring. Actually, I think there are great opportunities for complementarity. So in my experience, what I'm seeing is that monitoring at the local level and by communities can increase the temporal resolution of monitoring. Because sometimes government cannot monitor like every day. They are not the ones in the grounds. They are not the ones that are perceiving the changes in their forests, in their water, and so on. So I think this is where local monitoring is super important because they can add that temporal resolution to what the government does at the national level. And this is super important, especially for events that require rapid action. So now the challenge is how we connect that local monitoring with actors that we need to react when something happens, right? When there is a fire, when there is a deforestation, and so on. So I think we have a challenge, and it's to connecting the two levels and also to help us to help stakeholders to be aware of that complementarity, especially in terms of temporal resolution.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Switching gears a little bit, we have a question from the floor, and specifically directed to Manuel. And the question is that the international community taking into account with sufficient clarity the problem of the cocoa economy and the impact on land reclamation, water pollution, loss of biodiversity, the climate crisis, and the weakening of democracy. And I know you have a long experience both in the NGO community, but also in government. So I think you maybe have some unique perspective on how this tension sort of plays out and can maybe provide some clarity, if you would, please.
Thank you, Luis. And I will take advantage to make a brief comment about this independent monitoring, very brief. You know that in the Amazon Tech, the former Amazon Tech, one key message was to connect data with actionable, with action. No? So data is good, but not enough. So data is not enough, it is not actionable. And in that sense, the connection with independent monitoring, it is good. But on the other hand, if that monitoring could mobilize governmental or some other kind of action. So that connection, it is really, really good. And also let me take advantage that in October the 19th, we will have again the Amazon Tech. Okay, let's go to the climate and to the big challenges. It is interesting what I heard in the panel around climate change, because fortunately, climate change, it is not more just a topic. It is a key element of development. And that is a key message for today's panel, because it is about the economy, it is about social development, it is about policies and political debates. So it is more than just a topic. And climate change, it is bringing to us different kind of tasks. The NDCs, that is one of those. The future of the Amazon modeled by the science. We have the long-term strategies. We have the voluntary markets. We have the discussion around Article 6. We have finance. We have many of those topics. And I know that the question it is if the international community, it is really completely aware of what is the level of task that we must adopt. For sure, yes. For sure, we can do even more. That's true. we are not yet on track. But things are happening, as it has just been said by the UNFCCC Secretariat with the synthesis report of the NDCs. So the current synthesis report of the NDCs is showing that there are some progress, but still we could raise the pressure in 2.7. So what we do need to have, it is more ambitious. And that includes countries in the Amazon. For example, if for Peru, 63.5% of our emissions, it is because land use, it is because degradation, and it is because deforestation. For sure, technology and science to address those main sources of emissions and to achieve our NDCs targets are key. The point is that probably in a case as in Peru, we do need to create more awareness in decision makers. And that is something that probably it is happening in the global arena, but not yet in the domestic one. Let me finish by saying, Luis, we are in a time of implementation. And to implement, what we do need to have, it is domestic actions. So it is not just about of having decision makers in the international fora taking decisions. That is not enough if we are not able to do the same domestically. And in that sense, technology can help to achieve our own tasks and to fulfill with our own targets. But things are happening, the economy is changing, and we are in time of transition, and that is a key element. The world, it is transitioning to something different. The world of 2030 will be completely different of what we are currently living.
Thank you very much. I can't think of a better way to end this this session. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, we're out of time. But I think we've had some really clear messages here, I think the message that climate change is an economic issue and that we need to bring all the tools available to us to undertake action is important. I think we've heard really important messages about the need for democratization of data and the need for democratization of analytics and just the way that can support change and understanding how the policy-making process is not a rational decision-making process. It's about competing interests, and technology can be brought to the table to level the playing field. The importance of independent access to technology to be able to monitor and empower communities to take charge of their own natural resources. So I want to thank all of the panelists for an excellent job. I think the level of discussion has been top-notch for us. I've learned a lot from this discussion. I hope you all have taken some new messages away, new thoughts away. And so thank you all for your participation today. And please, everyone that's listening, please feel free to follow up with the different speakers who have been here today and continue this discussion and bring this discussion into the wider discussion of the Global Landscapes Forum. Thank you all very much.